Taoiseach, I raised with you over the last 10 days or so the attempt by Oireachtas, the State Forestry Company, to sell off Killeager Forest in Enniskerry. And despite
You've done well there, haven't you?
What?
You've done well there.
We've done well, and I'm glad to say I got a call from them yesterday saying they decided to abandon the sale. They did try and suggest that it wasn't finalised about selling it, and I just want to inform the House that there were for sale signs all around the forest. I went up there and it was being advertised on an estate agent's website. So they had planned to sell it, and it was intervention and public outcry that stopped it. But when Oireachtas phoned me, they said the reason they were considering selling it because of access problems and impeding commercial viability. Now, that points to me to one of the big problems of forestry in this country, is that Oireachtas' mandate is all wrong. It's linked to commercial viability rather than to the expansion of the forest estate, the protection of that forest estate, issues like biodiversity, and indeed supporting the farmers, rather than being a problem for the farmers in terms of supporting them in developing afforestation as a viable livelihood for farmers. And I think you should consider revisiting the Oireachtas Act essentially in that context and changing the mandate of Oireachtas.
There's 723 million of carbon tax funding will be allocated to a flagship agri-environment and climate measure. And Deputy Callaghan, that's in addition to the Pillar 2, to encourage farmers to farm in a greener and more sustainable way. Now, that's carbon tax funding that Deputy MacDonald's against. I don't know how we're supposed to do all these things if we don't have some funding base. Deputy Boyd Barrett's against it. Deputy Barry's against it. Are you against carbon tax? No. Yeah, that's my point. But about 723 million, which will help us.
Put it on the
which will help us, deal more effectively and with capacity the agenda around climate change. And I think there's a lot of, in my view, either delusional thinking or just pure politics at play in terms of people's attitudes to this agenda, because we can't do it without, first of all, the science tells us we should do it, and the scientists say it's the right way to go, but also we do need that funding also to change direction in terms of areas like forestry, agri-environment schemes, and so on. In terms of the licence for thinning, that requirement, that's a fair point. And again, I'll discuss that with the Minister in response to what's required. We are looking at, as I said earlier, measures that might facilitate low-level planting, low-volume planting, without having the same bureaucratic necessity that's currently there. Yeah, and Minister McConalogue, Minister Hackett is looking at that and whether amendments can be brought forward to facilitate that on farmland as well. Because I think I'm very impatient and I'm very intolerant of this whole area, because I think Ireland is a place where we can and should be growing far more trees than we're growing. It creates a carbon sink ultimately. It's probably the ultimate guarantor we have in terms of emissions and getting Ireland's contribution to climate change right. And I take the overall point that the mandate of Oireachtas has to be a very clear one. In addition to what it works in terms of its work on the commercial side, it has a very strong mandate, must now be part of the solution to climate change and to addressing that issue through land use strategies and through the forestry sector. And that's something we're very committed to. On Mercosur,